And I've always loved that. I keep that expression behind my desk. So today, I believe that there are a lot of people in the United States of America, and probably on Fleet Street in London and other capitals of the world, financial capitals, whose goal is to accumulate money for the sake of accumulating money, and not for the sake of utilizing it to help their fellow man and woman and to help mankind. And if there is a goal beyond making money, then it's really fun. I mean, it is really enjoyable. And you work twice as hard, and you're enthused, and you're excited. But if it's for the sake of accumulation of money, for some reason or another, you lose the spirit.
You really thought when you went to Apollo and said, guys, I know you want out of the deal, but this money is all going to cure cancer. This is all going to charity. You really thought, if I'm not mistaken, because I talked to you right after that, you really thought they were going to go, oh, it's charity, didn't you?
Well, I kind of did, yes.
Yeah. I didn't, John. No, I didn't think they would make that change. Business has had to have changed since you got into it. When did you first start? I mean, because I was in his office, and there's this museum on the first floor because this is global headquarters. And at the end of this hallway, there are these gold records. And I said, "What are these gold records? What did you just sing at some point?" And it was like you were the first K-tel guy, right?
Right. Well, I had to come up with something fast, Glenn, some innovation in my mind in order to create the wealth. My father was a rural school teacher in Idaho. I didn't have a rich uncle, and so I had to have the money to start the plastics and chemical business, and so I came up with this idea of selling phonograph records over television. And so we did, and we sold millions and millions of them. And this was back in the late 60s, and we utilized that money in order to get into the
You were the first one to put together the compilation albums.
That's
right?
correct.
And you put together like the Christmas album stuff. I mean,
yeah.
I remember from my childhood growing up, we had some of these. And little did I know it was going to an evil corporation.
Evil, yeah.
And then you took that money and you did this.
We made some of the first plastic products in America, yes.
And this was yours, the styrofoam egg
carton, meat tray, hamburger container.
McDonald's.
Plates.
And when you found out that that was bad for the environment, what happened?
Well, you know, I'm not sure it is bad for the environment, Glenn.
I love you. See, this is why I love this guy. I love you. If it is, and it just really hacks people off on the left, I like to go have styrofoam bonfires, but that's me.
No. The point of it is that in many ways you can recycle this product and use it over and over again, number one. And number two, you have to say what provides the freshness and the cleanliness for the food that you're about to partake of, and this is much healthier and cleaner and fresher, and so in many ways people are very confused about plastics, because if you recycle plastics you can use them 10 or 20 or 30 times over again, and so plastics is a wonderful product. I mean, we could not live in today's world without plastics because of medical supplies, because of bicycles, because of computers, and most of the environmentalists that are against plastics, they ride up on their bicycle, they've got their plastic outfit on, they've got their plastic helmet on.
Hang on just a second, back in just a second, hang on. I felt a minute ago we were with John Huntsman and he was talking about plastics, and I felt like I was in It's a Wonderful Life. Remember when he's like, George, take all the money you have and put it in plastics. There's one man in my life who has been a mentor of biblical proportions, John Huntsman. He is a guy who gives me the confidence to know that you don't have to cut corners. You can make ethical decisions, and even if it seems like you lose at the time, you'll win. A guy who really truly believes that a handshake is enough. Look a man in the eye and shake his hand. I think that's the kind of country that we, most of us at least, want to be. He is the founder and the executive chairman of the Huntsman Corporation, the founder of the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and author of the book that you must read, Winners Never Cheat. John, I want to take you to, there was never a time when you thought, you know, I'm just going to cut this corner. I'm just going to cut this corner. I'm just going to compromise here.
Well, you've asked me a question, Glenn, about cutting corners, but I have to say something that may be way out of whack and way out of place, but one of the finest men I've ever met in my life is Glenn Beck.
Stop.
And
See, he's avoiding the question. He's obviously cut corners.
Listen. Your audience doesn't know this. I've been fishing with you, Glenn. I've been in the mountains with you. I've been alone with you. You and I have had discussions on everything from religion to space to families. We've cried together. We've laughed together. And you're one of the finest, sweetest, good men, Glenn Beck, I've ever met.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Huntsman, you have avoided the question. Because you told me the story of Shell, which cost you how much money when you were selling was it to Shell? You were selling part of your chemical company to Shell.
It was to Great Lakes Chemical Company,
okay.
Yes.
And you had agreed on a price. You shook hands on a deal.
Correct.
Can you tell the story?
Well, I can. I don't want to sound self-serving, Glenn, but in it, in a nutshell, I used to sell a part of my business about every 3 or 4 years, and then I'd buy it back again when things were good. And with this one occasion, I sold 40% of our company, and the business was quite large at this time, so I sold 40% of it, and we agreed on a price of $54 million. I sold it to Great Lakes Chemical Company, a company headquartered in West Lafayette, Indiana. And it took about 6 months for the legal people, the lawyers, to get around to the contracts, and by the time they got around to the contracts, the prices of our petrochemicals and other products had gone straight up, and the value of that 40% piece of our business was now worth $250 million because earnings had increased dramatically.
And you had just shook hands with him. You had no contract, $54 million.
We shook hands on day one. Emerson Campen, who was our CEO, and I shook hands. So he came back to me after the 6 months and said, you know, it's been 6 months, it's been my fault, my attorneys didn't move fast enough. I'll tell you what I'll do, John, the business has gone up dramatically. Let's split the difference between $54 million and $250 million. And you get, let's say it's $125 million, and I'll pay you that much because you're certainly entitled to more than $54 million. And I said, no, Emerson, you don't understand. We shook hands. You know, all I expect is $54 million. And in my heart of hearts, I never thought about anything beyond $54 million.
Isn't there people like, there's no one around you going, John, shut up?
Well, probably a few. I mean, but, you know, it just never occurred. It wasn't something that you thought about. Or
How do you teach that, John? How do you teach that? I know that you give a lot of money to, like, the Wharton School of Business, and I believe business schools are having a hard time teaching ethics. They don't even understand. People don't even understand. You'll say, is this good or is this good? And they'll say, well, this makes more money. This is good. Well, no, that's not ethical. How do you teach it?
Well, first of all, I had shaken his hand. And secondly, I'd made an agreement with him. And it was in law, embodied in my own head that an agreement's an agreement. And he never got over it. He never got over it. In fact, when he passed away, his wife had me speak at his funeral, along with the governor of Indiana, Evan Bayh. And but people said, well, that's so unusual. And I said, no, it's not. What's unusual about being honest? I mean, it isn't that I'm trying to sound self-serving or anything like that. I wasn't at all. It was just that when you know, there's just an ethical aspect about life that if we're straight with each other, then we're straight with our God, and we're straight with our family, and we're straight with our wife and our children. And
you don't believe he's telling a lie in his personal life, but his personal life doesn't matter. This is business. You don't believe in that.
Well, you can't operate under two standards.
Yeah,
No,
okay.
no, I don't believe in that, Glenn, no.
All right. Back in just a second. John Huntsman is the founder and executive chairman of the Huntsman Corporation, founder of the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and a good friend of mine, who has really kind of taken me under his wing a bit. I didn't know anything about, I don't know much about anything, quite honestly. And John and I met about 5 years ago. John is a guy who was in the Nixon administration, and you're like, that doesn't match. Except John Huntsman was the one guy who, when that all went down, everyone on the Hill and in the White House said, no need to even question him, there's no way he would have been a part of anything like that. His reputation has been golden for a very long time. When we were together recently, John told me a story that I knew, but not very well, because I just didn't know it. I didn't want to pry, and I didn't want to ask. But he told me a story about something that happened in his life, and I want to tell you why he told me after he relates the story to you. It's about kidnapping in the family. Your son was kidnapped.
Yes.
Tell the story.
I've never told it before, Glenn, on television, so forgive me if I get a little emotional, because it brings back it conjures up a few things that it was. I just given a large amount of money to an institution to help, and I hadn't realized in giving money sometimes that the people track the source of that money, and they find your address, and they find your home, and they scope it out, and as did these people for several days. They found that my wife and I were gone, and some of our children were home, and they had come home early to go back to school. It was during the Christmas holidays, and we were out at some of our plants and facilities visiting with some of our associates. Anyway, they took one of our sons when he walked out, and they would have taken anyone who happened to walk outside at that point in time onto our driveway, and put a pillowcase over him, and then put masking tape around his hands, and took him to a place with a knife at his throat, and then called his brother. And his brother happens to be in the audience with us today, and so he and I haven't talked about this for over 20 years, and so in any event, we were able, after this one son who was in the audience with us today was called, and he was home alone, he was called and said that his brother was going to be killed, cut into little pieces, if his father didn't give $1 million of ransom. And I was on the other side of the country. They finally called me, and we flew home all night and met with the FBI. I'd call them. We had them stationed all over our state, all around our home. We'd put all of our other children under protective custody. They were in different parts of the world. Some were missionaries, some were students, and we didn't know what was going on. In any event, the next morning, I was called again and asked for the ransom, and I had to keep them on the line as long as I could. And this is one of the times I was grateful that I was a reasonably good negotiator, because I kept them on long enough until the FBI could determine fairly closely to where they were located. And then two very brave FBI agents went in, and they took the knife from my son's throat and put it inside of an FBI agent's stomach and just cut him in two, literally. And he was bleeding to death, and they got him to a hospital quickly and saved his life, but he had to retire from the FBI. They came out and gave him the highest award from the FBI. And we did get our son back, and no money was paid. And so we were grateful that that event was.
What did you do when you first got your son home?